Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to show you 5 ways to make your beats sound more lo-fi and nostalgic. These techniques will hopefully help you achieve that emotional lo-fi flair found in downtempo music and lo-fi hip-hop beats. So the first tip is based around tape simulation. One of the reasons lo-fi music is such an interesting genre to produce is that you are purposefully adding or retaining sonic imperfections that producers decades ago would have been trying to remove from their recordings. These imperfections such as tape flutter, subtle detuning, and other audio artifacts can really add a vintage, nostalgic element to your tracks. So I know you guys love free plugins, so I've got 2 free tape simulation plugins to show you. First up is Tape Cassette 2 from Calum Audio. This is an incredibly intuitive, beginner-friendly plugin for adding some vintage, warmth, and character to a sound. As you can see, we have saturation, low pass, noise, wow, and flutter controls, as well as an oversampling option up here. So yeah, this is a really useful, lightweight tape simulation tool. We also have Chow Tape, which is much more detailed and allows you to add tape degradation with incredible precision, even down to the thickness and angle of the simulated tape machine. The second lo-fi technique is making your chords jazzier and more interesting to the listener. In lo-fi music, especially lo-fi hip-hop, sampling is incredibly common, where producers will use jazz, soul, or blues samples to add a retro vibe to a track. Jazz chord samples such as piano or keys are particularly good for adding raw emotion, but if you don't want to sample and prefer to use MIDI sequences, try recreating the more obscure, unique jazz chords of the 60s and 70s. For example, listen to the difference between these 2 chord sequences. So this sequence sounds a bit too standard and robotic to evoke much emotion, whereas if we compare it to this, in my opinion, this has a much more melancholic tone, and I think with some tape emulation would sound much better in a lo-fi beat. If you are wondering how to create these kind of chords, I'll leave a link below to some incredible YouTube tutorials for jazz chords, because it's way too big of a subject for this video. Scalar 2 by Plugin Boutique is also an insanely helpful plugin for discovering and experimenting with various musical scales and chord progressions if you have no knowledge of music theory. The second chord sequence I showed you is a variation from Scalar 2, and I use this thing all the time for instant chord and melodic inspiration, so I'll leave a link to that down below if you do want to check it out. Lo-fi tip number 3 is to make use of sound beds. In my opinion, adding a sound bed to a lo-fi track can add so much atmosphere and make the track a lot more immersive for the listener. Common examples would be vinyl crackle, rain falling on a window, city ambience, coffee shop ambience, forest sounds, and so on. So how do you actually find these sounds? So usually you can find ambient Soundbed videos on YouTube, which you can always download and experiment with. However, I'd be careful if you want to release a track commercially and it has a soundbed taken from YouTube, as it's probably copyrighted. To avoid this, there are some really cheap royalty-free sample packs out there that include hundreds of organic ambient sounds and textures. Again, I'll leave a link to some of my favorites below. Or finally, if you've got the equipment, you can even go out and record these sounds yourself. Tip number 4 is to use a drum bus to create dusty, natural sounding drum loops. Group processing on drums can be really important, as doing this not only contributes to the aesthetic and character of the drums, but it really helps to glue the drums together to create a more cohesive sound. Some examples of lo-fi drum bus effects are low-pass filters, saturation, compression, transient shapers, and even some light high-end reverb. So here's a basic drum loop with no effects. And here's that same loop with a low-pass filter, saturation, and some compression. Hopefully you can hear it sounds a lot more cohesive, and the effects are giving it that dusty, emotional lo-fi feel. This final technique is one that I use a lot to add a bit more body and warmth to a beat, but it doesn't apply to every lo-fi track out there. Sometimes I find adding a soft, low mid-range pad behind the main piano helps to add a lot of nostalgia and emotion. So we can just copy these chords, and you can use any synth for this, but Diva is particularly good as it has tons of smooth vintage pad presets to choose from. And here is the same beat with a pad behind the piano. Okay, so that was my top 5 techniques for making lo-fi beats. If you got some value out of this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to support the channel. It really does mean a lot. Also, comment down below any more techniques that you use to create nostalgic lo-fi beats. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.